Good morning. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. We are finally here, woo, to the final review for CDFM Module 2 out of the 2020 study guide. So we're going to wrap up the review of all the materials that we've covered in the past month and a half for Module 2. The goal is, after you've completed today, is for you to take some time, a week at the most, to review the material again just one more time, because again, repetition, repetition, repetition. And that way you'll be able to understand the information more clearly. And you should be able to also schedule to take your exam for Module 2 within a couple of weeks, because you don't want to wait for too long to do it and then you start forgetting the material. So please ensure that you review the material. All right, so we're going to go ahead and continue review. If you're on the Facebook Live and you have questions, please go ahead and type your questions in the comments below this video. And as I come back later, I'll be able to go over your questions. If you're on the phone line and you have questions, please stop me at any point so that I can further explain the information that we're going over. Again, the study group is simply an aid to help you as you've already been studying. You might have already went to the EDFMT, that 1-week course sponsored by the ASMC, and you still need some additional push to let you know that you're ready to take the exam. Well, that's what this resource and this study group aims to do, is to help to get you and push you to overcome that, the fear that you may have to take the exam. If you understand the information, it's not as defeating as you think you are. Many have come before you and will come after you who've done it. So there is a way, but you have to be dedicated to studying for the exam. I cannot put the information in your head. All I'm doing is helping to make it simplified enough so that you can understand it when you're put under the pressure of taking an exam, that you're able to continue. All right, so before we begin, we have some people on the phone line. I'll give you an opportunity, if you have any particular questions that you may want to ask me on something you may have reviewed last week or in this past week that you want me to explain before we continue. Any questions on the phone line? Well, I get my pen here and my handy dandy glasses. All right, I cannot make this information. Hello, I have someone on the phone line.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Did you have a question or you're just checking in?
No, I'm just checking in. Thank you.
All right, welcome. All right, so as we continue review of Module 2, remember, yes, Module 2 is the hardest of the exam because you have a lot of moving pieces. So that's why I broke the information down the way I did to help you to understand. So if nothing else, you need to start off by understanding what are the 3 DoD support systems. If you're on the phone line and you feel like shouting them out, feel free to go do so. I'll always pause a little bit to give you an opportunity to throw the answers out. The 3 DoD support systems, everything that the Department of Defense does falls into one of these buckets. JCIDS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System. PPBE, Planning, Programming, Budgeting and Execution. The Defense Acquisition System, the DAS. All 3 of those systems work together. They overlap to meet the National Defense Strategy. So why are we trying to meet the National Defense Strategy, the NDS? We're trying to meet the National Defense Strategy because the strategy is built off of the Big Op Order. What is the Big Op Order called? The National Security Strategy. So everything started with the NSS document, National Security Strategy. All of the agencies review the NSS document to determine what their requirements are. The DoD does the same thing. and then pulls out the defense-related items out of the national security strategy, and then ultimately develops the national defense strategy. Part of the national defense strategy is defense for homeland security, joint planning guidance, and also the national military strategy. Who is the author of the national military strategy? That is the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. Well, who is the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff? What's their role? The chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff is the senior military advisor to the president, the SecDef, and the national military strategy. National NSC, National Security Council. All these acronyms are rolling around in my head. So the National Security Council, SecDef, and the president has advisors. So on the National Security Council, you got the president, the SecDef, the Secretary of State, Treasury, Energy, and Water, all of those. And then you have Director of Intelligence and the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff as standing advisors. All I'm doing is telling the story. So you have the JCIS. JCIS is run by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. He knows what the top military guy focuses, so he's in charge of the JCIS. What does the JCIS do? It is an analytical process that looks at the MLPF, doctrine, organization, training, material, leader development, education, personnel, and facilities. They analyze each one of those areas. Once they figure out, okay, the National Defense Strategy says we need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So we need to know, do we have the capability? Do we have enough people? Do we have the right equipment, the right aircraft, the right vehicles, the right computer systems? So all of that is the .MLPF review. The goal of JCIS is to identify any capability gap that we may have in the Department of Defense. So JCIS, who is run by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, he has this Joint Requirements Oversight Council, the JROC, to help him do the JCIS process. Once they identify the capability gap, then it must be a solution. Don't just tell me what the problem is. What is the solution to that problem? So they also remember the vice chairman is a military, and the other Joint Chief of Staff are all military. So it makes sense. They're all the top military folks who knows what the requirements are for the war fighters. So they publish an initial capabilities document. This is what we need to do. The issue is in doctrine. We need to update our doctrine. We need additional personnel by rank, by structure, by enlistment, by officer, enlisted, whatever that structure is, or it requires a material solution. If it's anything other than material, it triggers the PPBE process. That means we need to go to Congress, we need to plan, program for it, we get it approved, then we need to submit a budget request to Congress, and then once we get the appropriation approved, then we execute those funds. PPBE is the responsibility of the Deputy SecDef, that whole PPBE process. However, within the PPBE, there's individuals at the DoD level in charge of each phase of the PPBE process. Planning, the USD for policy. Programming, the DCAPE, Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation. Budgeting and execution is the responsibility of the USD Comptroller. So they're all in charge of the individual phases, but the Deputy SecDef is in charge of the whole PPBE process. If it's a material solution that is going to take to fill that capability gap, it triggers the acquisition system, our third system. The Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment is in charge of the DAS, Defense Acquisition System. He sits as the chairman of the Defense Acquisition Board. He has a co-chairman for the Defense Acquisition Board. Who can tell me who that co-chairman is for the Defense Acquisition Board?
The Undersecretary of Defense.
For which one?
So if it's the Undersecretary of Defense as the chairman.
He's got a co-chairman. So who's the co-chairman with the Undersecretary of Defense for ANS? Who's the co-chair? Okay, I'm gonna help you out. The co-chair of the Defense Acquisition Board is the vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. So the same guy that's in charge of JCIDS also sits on the Defense Acquisition Board, which is part of the acquisition system. And then the PPBE process is run by the Deputy Secretary. So on the acquisition side, you have the USD ANS, Acquisition and Sustainment, and a co-chairman for that board that sits to make sure that, again, the goal is to make sure that they tie in what that capability gap was that we identify and what you're building. Is it in line with what we think the solution was to fill that problem? So, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff is the co-chair of the Defense Acquisition Board. So we're going to go more in acquisitions today. All right, what are, for bonus, the phases, the milestones of the Defense Acquisition System? Because this is the meat and potatoes of the cost and economic analysis section. So in the beginning, once they identify what that course of action is going to be, now we need to start developing it. Is it something that we need to start from scratch? Or is it something that's already in the commercial sector? We just need to add some features to it? What is it? So in the material solution analysis, that is what is going on. They take that ICD, Initial Capabilities document from the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, that they said, okay, this is the capability problem. This is what it's going to take to fix it. It's a material solution. It's going to take a new aircraft. Then this is what the aircraft needs to be able to do. So in the first phase of the defense acquisition system, it's material solution analysis. It makes sense, right? We want to analyze which solution is going to fix the problem. Part of that is identifying the key attributes, key performance measures. What are the key things that this capability needs to be able to fulfill? And once we come up with different courses of action, how do we determine which one is best? We just go with the cheapest one? Do we go based on what capability, what other features it has? The analysis of the alternatives. Once we identify, okay, we're going to go with course of action 1, 2, and 3. Well, how are we going to analyze those alternatives? So those are the solutions that are identified in the first phase of the acquisition system. Before and after any decision point, or before and after any phase of this acquisition process, there's a decision point that has to be made. So the milestone decision authority, that means that's the senior acquisition person in that process, has to then sit down and go over the data, the findings up to that point. So after the first phase, the material solution analysis, the decision point is the milestone A. All right, let's see what you found out in the material solution analysis. Okay, what's your recommendation? Which course of action do you think we should go with and why? Does it have quantifiable benefits or non-quantifiable? Does it increase safety, security? You can't really put a cost on that. Or is it a savings? All of that is identified in milestone A. So a decision point is made, or decision is made in milestone A to determine if they continue to build the technology in technology maturation and risk reduction. So, but understand, a favorable milestone A decision, meaning when the milestone decision authority says, all right, go ahead, everything looks good, let's go ahead and move to phase 2, technology maturation. It does not mean that a full-fledged acquisition program is in effect. So it does not happen at milestone A. What is the purpose of technology maturation? Is we want to actually reduce any type of technology risk associated with the development. All I'm doing is telling the story of how you walk through the different phases and what happens at each phase. Are there any particular questions? Let me drink some water. All right, so the story continues. Go ahead with your question.
Now I was going to ask you about the acronym. 2 is totally different from 1. Is the acronym, do we need to know exactly what each acronym means?
Which acronym are you referring to?
Like the DDPG or the DPG or the...
Oh, yes.
Is it going to be stated like that, or is it going to be written out in whole?
Either or. So I could speak for myself. When I did the module 4, I think last year, most of it was all acronym. So had I not known what the acronym stood for, it can become confusing. So it's important for you to know the basics. And that's why I say you're not going to be able to know everything, but you need to know the key things that they talk about. And if they talk about it more than once, you probably need to know what that acronym stands for. Because if you have a question and the question is, okay, APB stands for Army Program Budget, Acquisition Program Baseline. Well, because you're talking to CDFM, APB stands for Acquisition Program Baseline. So when you have 4 options, some of it's going to sound good, but depending on what the subject is, that acronym can mean something different. Does that make sense to you?
It does, thank you.
Right, so you're not going to know all of them, but some, like the ones I'm repeating, are important enough because they repeat themselves in the study guide that, yeah, I think you should know those. So, like if they say KPP and KSA, okay, performance parameters and attributes, system attributes, and so forth, you need to know what those mean. All right, so we got material solution analysis phase, milestone A, that's a decision point where they decide if they're going to continue to the next phase or they want to make some changes in the data. Then once they approve milestone A to go to the next phase, that is technology maturation, where they actually determining ways to reduce risk. Any decision you make, there's always a risk associated with it. So when you're doing your planning, you need to identify what that risk is and see what measures you could put in place to reduce those risks. And so when you do the first 2 phases, you typically use RDT&E funding to do that. Research, development, technology, equipment. All right, so let's say everything went well with the technology maturation. Now to review that data, we move to milestone B. So before every phase, there is a decision point. So a favorable milestone B is the formal approval for an acquisition program. Milestone B, if you're asked, which is the formal initiation of an acquisition program. Does it happen at milestone A, B, C? No, it happens at milestone B. So once they approve it at milestone B to keep moving forward with the engineering, manufacturing, development phase, EMD, that is at milestone B. At milestone B, you also identify the LRIP, the low rate initial production. So think about it in this sense. When you're first developing something brand new, you don't want to develop all 100 of them. Let's say you need 100 items. When you first initially start developing it, you don't know if it's going to work. So you don't want to develop 100. You might say, okay, let's just develop 20. So the LRIP is the quantity or the scope, the lowest amount that you want to develop initially. So that is identified at milestone B. While all of that decisions are decisions are going on, we are updating the Acquisition Decision Memorandum, the ADM. So that is the document in this process that's being updated. Acquisition Decision Memorandum. Makes sense. All right, so once we get a favorable milestone B, we said that's the formal initiation of the acquisition program, so it pushes us into the engineering and manufacturing phase. EMD phase, entry into this phase occurs with successful milestone B, and the purpose of the engineering phase is to develop. Even if you don't remember the formal definition, okay, once you go into engineering and it's the formal phase, that means we're actually going to be building the item, developing it, testing it to see if it actually meets the capability gap. EMD. EMD, we also do our developmental testing, DT&E, during this phase. So you have different, if you look in this area, you have different types of testing. You have developmental testing, and later on, I think there's a overarching testing and evaluation. So just remember, development is initially done. Okay, stand by, somebody's trying to call. I can't answer right now. All right, let me I'm gonna pause for a few. Let me put her out of office here, because people keep trying to call me on Teams. Okay, actually, let me log out. Sign out. All right, sorry about that. All right, so any question on that portion of it? All right, so we identify the LRIP in milestone B, then we move to engineering and development, maturation, manufacturing and development. And then once that piece is done, we're testing it against the key performance measures, the systems attributes, to make sure it meets what we identify in the material solution analysis. Then once that's concluded, we have another decision point, milestone C. So milestone C and the limited deployment decision points. So that sounds like two things going on there. Is what we decide, we have to decide if we're going to, did it actually do what we wanted to do? Did it do what we expected to do? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to do anything else with it before we move on to full production? All right. All right, stand by. All right. All right, I'm still here. Okay. Somebody's quite persistent. I told them, don't bother me 11:30 to 1 on Wednesdays. All right. So production and deployment phase, that is phase 4. So we want to make sure that it's actually capable of fulfilling the mission. So now we go into putting it into operation. So we do the operational test and evaluation. So remember, the first one was developmental test and evaluation. in the engineering phase. And now in the production and deployment, we're actually doing an operational test and evaluation to put it in operation, to put it in the field to see how it actually performs. So effectiveness of the system. And also production and deployment is our go-ahead. Remember, the LRIP was just a number that we identified in Milestone B. We said we want to develop 20 in Milestone B. Once we get to production and deployment, this is the point where we develop that 20. So LRIP is developed. And then later on, before we develop the rest of them, the other 80, then we need to do a full rate production decision point. So it's not a milestone, it's not a phase, it's just another decision point that must be done after the LRIP once they get that data. Full rate production decision point. And once we build the item, we've did full operational capability, we've got all 100 built out in the field. Now we've got to sustain the item, support the item. So operations and support that uses O&M and MilPERS dollars to maintain it. This is the most expensive portion of a program, the operations and support, because you got to do that life cycle sustainment of the item. So all of that goes into the phases of the acquisition program. Any question on that? Because I know it can get boring if you just sit and listen to me all the time. All right, so we also learn in the acquisition piece the different types of acquisition programs. So now we're taking it down to more specific. We know we needed a capability, we filled the capability gap, we developed one, but we need to understand that there are different categories of acquisition program. A major acquisition, defense acquisition program, that's the MDAP, or a major automated information system, that's a system like DTS, Defense Travel System. That's something huge for the Department of Defense that will be considered a MAIS project, Major Automated Information System. So the acquisition category, ACAT 1, tells you that they are major category programs. Acquisition category 1 Delta, the D behind it tells you it's a DoD level program. So this is more like your aircraft, your vehicles, those big ticket billion-dollar programs. If it got to have a D behind it, it's a defense level program. If it's an acquisition category 1 Charlie, it's a component level program. So at the Army level, at the Navy level, their acquisition person will be the milestone decision authority for that program. On the automated information system, you have the MAIS, M-A-I-S. So if you have ACAT 1M for MAIS, it tells you it's a DoD level automated information system. If you have an ACAT 1AC, it's a component level system. So make sure we understand that piece of acquisition program. And when it comes to developing the cost estimates, the acquisition program baseline, that is the responsibility of the program manager. There are various program managers, and all the program managers work for a program office executive, a POE office. Part of developing a major acquisition program is the creation of or completion of a cost analysis requirement description. When it comes to the Department of Defense, if you have anything dealing with cost benefit analysis, cost analysis requirement, analysis of the alternative, future year defense program, all of those things I just listed is the responsibility of the Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation the DCAPE. So the DCAPE is the cost person at the DOD level. There are three different types of life cycle cost estimates, how they come up with the estimates that are done. So at the program level, it's a program office estimate, POE. Once you get to the component level, it's a component cost estimate. And if the estimate is done at the DOD level, it's called an independent cost estimate. So basically, when you're taking a test, you want to make sure you're reading the question. And before you get happy that you recognize the answer, ask yourself, what is this question asking me for? Is it asking me for, at the DOD level, who completes, what is the name of the life cycle cost estimate at the DOD level? That is the independent cost estimate. So you got to read the questions to understand what they're asking you. Later on in cost and economic analysis, we talk about cost estimating methods, different ways to come up with the estimates. Because your program manager does most of the legwork, but they got to come up with an estimate. That baseline is an estimate, the starting point of how much it's going to cost. So we talked about analogy, parametric, engineering, and actual costs. So analogy approach is saying we have one similar system already in the inventory. So we can use the cost of that system as a starting point. Which is, let's see. All right, and then you have parametric. Parametric approach is saying we have several systems that have similar attributes to what we're trying to develop. We couldn't have one product, so we take the individual prices of how much it costs for those individual physical attributes, and then we come up with a cost for what we're trying to build. So that is the statistical method or the top-down method. We got the cost of similar physical attributes, and then we develop, so top-down, statistical. Or the engineering method. Engineering tells you it's real detailed. We're starting from the bottom. Then we're trying to figure out the eaches. How much it costs to do this? That's the cost. How much is it to do that? That's the cost. And then we add that all up to come up with the cost estimate. And then if you already have that type of equipment in your inventory, you just go with the actual cost of what it costs you to buy that item. You can use an expert opinion approach or the Delphi technique. If you don't have time to do your full research, you can actually take the input from different expert opinions, and then if you see a pattern and they all pretty much have the same answers, then you can just, process of elimination, just say, okay, well, the majority goes with this response, so that must be correct. Any question on cost estimating methods, cost estimates at the DOD level, at the component level, at the program manager level? Any question? All right, we will move on. And then we talked about stealing costs and economic analysis, because there's a lot in here, so I'm just staying in this area for now, then I'll jump around. We talked about the learning curve. So the idea behind the learning curve theory is that the more you do a job, your workload should double. And so you're going to have to calculate if it takes X amount of hours at a certain learning curve percentage, how long is it going to take you to double your workload? That's what you're doing. So if you're given the hours and the percentage, simply multiply the total hours times the percentage. It'll tell you the hours it takes to get to the double that unit, and so forth. So they may give you some, and then they'll ask you to fill in the rest. Or you're given the hours and the units, and then they ask you for the learning curve percentage. Always remember, if you're dealing with the same category of work, the learning curve percentage for that category is always the same. Even if they have more than one lines, it's just done to confuse you. So it's always the same learning curve percentage. Earned value management, right? Earned value. So if you get work done on your house, the idea is your value of your home should go up, right? The work that was done should make things more valuable for your home. So it's the same thing. Earned value management is the government employee working with a vendor, a contractor, to monitor a contract. Just like if you're a contracting officer representative, COR, you're actually supposed to be looking at what the contract says they're supposed to do, and did they fulfill it. If it's electrical work, you have someone who knows about electric to be the COR. You can't be that person if you don't know what it looks like. So earned value management. So we're going to look at what we budgeted to spend, what we expected to spend versus the actual cost versus the value of the work done. So part of earned value management is going to require you, once they tell you the budgeted cost of work schedule and the budgeted cost of the work performed, that's the value of the work once it's done, you're going to have to calculate the schedule variance or the cost variance, and to see whether it's either on target or favorable, unfavorable. So make sure you review those formulas. And actually, take this out. So, again. So I'm just looking through to see any more highlights. And when you, by this point, since you've been going through the material, you should be able to just flip the page and just talk about the topic that's on the page. Understanding with your benefits can either be, like I mentioned earlier, quantifiable or non-quantifiable. So you might want to know quantifiable means, yes, you can put a dollar amount to it, cost savings, or you have non-quantifiable. It enhances morale, improve security, availability of the item. Now we can have more of those items because there are more of them available. Those are not things you can put a dollar amount against. So non-quantifiable benefits. The basic statistics, make sure you know what's the mean, median, and mode. You may have to do some calculations on the exam. They'll give you a list of values, and most likely the values are going to be all out of order. Some of the numbers will repeat, whether it's 1 through 10, but you have several numbers repeated. The first thing you always want to do before you do any calculation is put the numbers in numerical order. So if you have a couple of ones, you put 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, or whatever. Put the numbers in numerical order. Then you go back to the test and try to answer whatever questions is asked. Your mean, what's the average? You add up all of them. If it's 10 values, add up all 10 divided by 10. That's my mean. What's my median? Median is the number that's in the middle. If you've got 10 values, then maybe it doesn't come exactly on one number. You may have to find out, okay, it's 5.5 or whatever it is, like that. The mode is the number that repeats the most. So if you've already put the numbers in order, then you'll be able to see, okay, which one repeats the most. Oh, 4 repeats the most. So the number that repeats the most is 4. All right, so I'm going to switch gears. Let me see. Time value of money. We went over that. And with, yeah, I think I skipped that. The life cycle cost Remember, you have developmental costs. You have military construction. You have operations. I want to go back to that spot. Yeah. So you need to know if they give you a dollar amounts, RDT&E, procurement, Milcon, O&M, Milpers, and they say, okay, I want you to calculate the developmental cost. Well, you're going to need to know that developmental cost is anything that is RDT&E. So that's what you need to pull out of the life cycle cost composition section. All right, let me pull some of my notes. And again, if you're on the Facebook or the phone line and you want me to send you, I do have study aids, Word documents, PowerPoint slides that I've created with this material to help you once you get out of the book and you want to do something different with the material. Is you could just send me an email, write it on here. I'll give you my Outlook. You can look me up, Thomas Helen, on the global. So it doesn't matter what service you work for, you'll be able to find me there. And I can send them to you. I'd rather not just put them out there because they clog up people's email, the ones that don't really want them or they're not really committed. And so I don't want to do that. Well, I say anymore because I used to try to give it to folks, but they don't want it. All right, so we talked about development of teams. When you develop a team, no matter whatever the team is developed for, whichever organization, whatever the purpose of the team, you always want to keep your teams 10 or less for it to be beneficial, where people don't start arguing or lose focus, or those, you're always going to have some that real energetic and want to get things done and don't miss any markers, and then you're going to have the ones that are real lax and like, why stress? So you go through different phases, and actually let me write. So you go through forming the group, storming when everybody's conflict and trying to figure out who does what, norming, and performing stage. So the 4 stages of team development. And if you Google 4 stages of team development, I promise you these will come up. So you'll have pictures and examples of what the development stages. But the 4 stages of team development form, and how you may see it, it's not going to ask you for the definition. It's probably going to give you a scenario, say, hey, you're a new employee, just got to your job, you are part of a new organization, your supervisor gave you your duty description, tells you what you're going to need to do. What part of this? Well, you're forming because you just got there. You haven't really figured out anything. So you got to say, is this forming? Are we storming, norming, or performing? So that's how you might see it again in the near future. All right, I'm listening for any particular questions. All right, so let me see some of my tools here.
I don't have any at this time. It's a lot of material to absorb, though.
So that's what makes it difficult. And it's better if you take the chunk and understand each chunk, so that when you're given on the test, and you're still only going to have, if it's 80 questions, it's going to be all mixed up. So you're not going to know which bucket is going to be coming out of. But if you understand each bucket, it doesn't matter what they ask you. That's why I say you read the question, figure out what topic they're asking you in your head, and then you'll be able to navigate to that material. Let me see. So, yeah, I was trying to, I don't want to ask some questions that are already asked. Let's see. All right, let me check on the Facebook, because it looks like we've gone over most all these. Milcon. All right, what is, and we did this last week, So what is the newest DoD armed service? That's the easy one. Which is the newest DoD armed service? The Space Force. All right, we learned that in the very beginning. Which act identified the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff as the senior military advisor? That is the Goldwater-Nichols Act. Who acts as the chairman of the JROC? Who is in charge of the JROC, Joint Requirements Oversight Council? That's the vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. Which is the only exception where a combatant commander submits their own POM? That is special operations. Because everybody, all the other combatant commanders have to submit their requirements to the component in charge of it. But special ops are allowed to submit their own requirements. What is the name of the highest level strategy document in the U.S. government? Or the Big Op order, right? The highest level strategy document is a national security strategy. Who develops the national military strategy? That is the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. Who is in charge of the budgeting phase of PPBE? That is the Undersecretary of Defense, USD Comptroller. Actually, let me update USD Comptroller. The final document of the planning phase of PEB is called what? The Defense Planning Guidance. The final document of the programming phase and the budgeting phase. So you have, let's see, Defense Programming Guidance and Program Budget Decision. Let's see if I said that correctly. Title 41. Under what title? Under what title are project orders? Remember we talked about project orders versus Economy Act order. Doing a project versus working economy. You got to know the differences and which one you deobligate the funds at the end of the fiscal year, Economy Act. So project orders are in Title 41. When you shift funds within the same appropriation, that is the definition of what? Reprogramming. So you're reprogramming within the same appropriation. You transfer out to a different appropriation. So reprogram in and transfer out. Working capital fund. What type of appropriation is a working capital fund? It is a no-year appropriation, does not expire. Which category of MWR funds receive 100% appropriation? That is, and no NAF funds. That is category A. And I promise you, if you have to get into the material, because it might sound like, oh no, I'm never going to be able to get this. I promise you, if you keep, and whenever you go to a particular subject, focus just on that subject at that time when you're first starting off and so forth. But eventually, before you take the exam, you have to be able to put all this stuff together, because a lot of it overlaps. They're not individual pieces. All right, to document the cost, schedule, and performance objectives of a program initiation. Where do you document that? In the acquisition program baseline. So the purpose of that whole acquisition system is to manage cost, schedule, and performance. EVM, earned value management. We're managing costs, how much it costs me for you to do the job, how long you told me it's going to take for you to build that additional room on my house, and is it up to standard? Performance, cost, schedule, performance. So remember I said who chairs the Defense Acquisition Board? That's the USD-ANS, and co-chaired by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. Let's talk about appropriation. If in the appropriation, in the authorization, you receive 15 million, in the appropriation law you receive 10 million, how much do you have to execute? You have 10 million. Whatever is appropriated is the budget authority that you have, regardless of what is said in the authorization law. What is the purpose of the authorization law? What does it authorize?
Authorizes programs?
It authorizes the programs. That's correct. So that's the sole purpose of it. So even if funding is listed in the authorization law, it does not give us budget authority. If I'm coming up with a cost estimate, and I'm comparing one similar system to what I want to do, which cost estimate method is that? That is analogy. If I have multiple similar physical attributes, that means I have, okay, this particular one on the outside, this vehicle looks like what I want to do. This particular other vehicle has a GPS that does XYZ. So when I take the individual cost of these similar physical attributes, that is parametric. In Lean Six Sigma, what does analyze mean? Because part of it is knowing what you're going to inspect, then you analyze the cause and effect. When you analyze, that's what you're doing. This is what's supposed to happen, and this is what happened. Because this happened, that's what the result is. Okay, let me shift to another sheet. All right, purpose, time, and amount. 31 U.S. Code, ADA violation, availability of funds. 31 U.S. Code, 1301, 1502, 1517, 1341, 1342, and 1517. So I was going out of order. Learn these things in order, and that way when you see it again on a test, it's easier to remember. So I knew I was going out of order because as soon as I said the wrong one, I couldn't remember nothing else. Right? So learn them in order, say them in order. 31 U.S. Code, 1301, 1502, 1341 deals with violating appropriation. 1342 deals with voluntary services, accepting and not accepting. And 1517 is violation of apportionment. That's as much as I want to know there. Who does the GAO work for? Government Accountability Office. Right? Because the GAO is important in this whole CDFM because they work directly for Congress. Congress tells us, right? Congress tells us what we can and cannot do with these appropriations. The GAO is the senior auditing or external auditing organization that does the checks and balances for Congress to make sure that the executive branch is following the rules with the budget. Why do I say the executive branch? Because who submits the budget to Congress? the executive branch, right? The president. So you see how that kind of, say again?
No, I'm following you.
Okay. Right. So if they say the GAO monitors the executive branch, that answer is correct. All you got to remember is that we submit our budget request. It goes to Office of Management and Budget. Office of Management and Budget works for the president or the executive branch. So once Congress approves the funding and the president signs it, it becomes law. Then yes, the GAO is monitoring the executive branch and the way we spend those fundings, the do's and don'ts. All right, let's integrate it. What is the name of the document created by the combatant commanders to identify their requirements? It was only one document, we said, created by combatant commanders. What is it called? It's called the Integrated Priority List, the IPL. That's where they identify what their priorities are, what they need to get their job done in those combatant commands. What is the name of the President's Principal Forum on National Security and Foreign Policy Matters? That is the National Security Council. What else? When you have, when the government either hires a contractor or the government keeps it in-house. Let me make sure. Yeah, this module 2. So this overlaps with module 3, I think. Whether it's commercial activity, that means you have a contractor that takes over either portion of a mission or they take over like housing, government housing on post, they take over the entire mission. In order for a civilian contractor to win a bid over a military contractor, what is the percentage below the in-house cost? It must be at least 10%. 10% lower for it to be considered. And what is the name of the in-house or the government structure to do a job? Maybe I'm going too deep, but it is the MEO, Most Efficient Organization, is the name of the government structure. So a lot of this, let's see. What can you do with an appropriation when it enters the expired state? You can make upward and downward adjustments only, right? Okay, so it looks like I've gone through most. Let me see what's Economy Act is severable. So we talked about that. Cost and economic analysis. ICD sets forth. Okay, so we went through all of this. Work breakdown structure, WBS. Learning curve, we talk about that. EVM. Make sure you know how to do those calculations for the EVM, as I mentioned, for schedule variance and cost variance. Discount rates. So, GPRA. So, yeah. What question do you have of me? Let me put it that way. Because the only thing I have left is the miscellaneous funds. So in order for any organization, while you're thinking of your questions, I'll just go through this piece, is you have miscellaneous funds that an installation may be able to keep. So either they're appropriated or you have the statutory authority, like the voluntary services, you have a statutory authority to have volunteers, okay? Yes, like candy stripers. They can have volunteers. Or recycling program. They don't just automatically, okay, let's recycle. There's some statutory authority under Title 10 or whatever title, whatever law, that authorizes, okay, to charge people money to go to hunting or fishing or any one of those categories of things, or use the bowling alley on post. Is this NAF funds versus appropriated funds? So all of those things. Back to appropriations. If I wanted to procure something and it's $150,000, yes, I can use O&M funds to procure a system. Anything $250,000 or less, you can use O&M dollars to procure. Military construction up to $2 million. So $2 million or less, you can also use for minor construction. I can use O&M dollars to do that construction. So those are things you need to know. Again, if given the type of appropriation, RDT&E, 2-year appropriation. I tell you what date it is today, 2005, 2002, November. Well, I'm in FY03, and I ask you, when are those funds closed? You need to be able to walk it through, okay? RDT&E is good for FY3 and 4. Then every appropriation is expired for 5 years, so that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and FY10, those appropriations will be closed or canceled. You need to be able to walk that based on the information that's given. And yes, if you see it on any of these questions on the exam, you will always have more questions, more data than what you need to calculate the problem. So you have to know what right looks like to be able to know what do you need to pull out of that particular problem. So again, that's why I said you can't just wait until Wednesdays when I come on here for an hour and a half, and I go over certain percentages to look at this material. This is something you have to dedicate. If you're doing it for a month, okay, I'm focused 2 hours every day or however many hours a week to go over this material for comprehension. Do not just memorize the information, because I promise you, you're not going to see it in the same format. And some of you are going to probably come back and say, that wasn't in the book. And I'm going to say, you're probably right, because not everything that is asked on that test will be in the book. So you need to know the book inside and out to be able to be successful. I don't want to scare you. I just want you to be dedicated to completing the process. And if you complain to ASMC and say, hey, this particular question, it's not like the schoolhouse, this particular question was not in the study guide, they're going to refer you to all the regulations, the laws, the guidances, the policies, OMB circular, DODI instruction. Any one of those areas, they can pull information from that they reference in this book. So you're not going to win that argument. So I want you to be dedicated, knowing, yes, I wouldn't be doing this, taking my time doing this, if I felt like, you know what, they're not going to be able to learn it. I promise you, if you stay dedicated to the information, you too can be CDFM certified. What are your questions as we complete review of CDFM Module 2? All right, those on the phone line, what you got?
With the time that we have left, can we go over a quick review of 1?
Okay. All right, let me make sure, let me finish up with 2 and get off the video, and then definitely I can do that for you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end the video since I don't hear any Module 2 questions. And if you have questions on the video, please leave the responses or questions at the bottom of the video on Facebook. Then when I go back later to download the video, I'll take a look and respond. So thank you all for stopping by. So don't hang up on the phone line. This is Helen Thomas on the CDFM study group. I'll see you guys again next time.